step right into the shadows with me for a second. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely dark, almost forgotten chapter of American history, an event that literally shook the nation to its core and birthed a legend that, honestly, still dominates pop culture today. I want you to paint a vivid sensory picture in your mind. Just imagine a peaceful 1870s steam locomotive, heavily loaded, just tearing across the untouched, sprawling American countryside. Inside those wooden cars sit completely unsuspecting passengers, just relaxing and enjoying a quiet journey. And right behind them, the mail cars are absolutely stuffed with letters, packages, and heavily secured iron safes holding massive, incredibly valuable shipments of cash. Boom. That piece? Completely shattered. Armed, masked, men. They just appear, dead ahead on the tracks, stepping right out of the wilderness shadows. Rifles raised, no warning whatsoever. Literally zero time to react. The iron brakes absolutely scream. The train is violently jolted to a halt. And before the dust can even begin to settle, these masked robbers are climbing aboard. They ruthlessly overpower the totally terrified crew, crack open those safes, grab the loot, and they're gone. They completely vanish back into the endless wilderness before anyone can even process what just happened. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the Hollywood robbery myth. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds exactly like the opening scene of a classic Western movie, right? But actually, this was a terrifying historical reality back in 1873, violently executed by the infamous James Younger gang. Section 2, America's rapid railroad expansion. Let's zoom out for a second to really set the scene of a rapidly changing America in the 1870s. Those spreading railroads? They brought incredible, unprecedented wealth to the country, but they also introduced some severe, glaring vulnerabilities. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why. Think about the logistical nightmare here. First off, trains are completely predictable. They have to follow the exact same iron tracks day in and day out. Second, if trouble is standing on the tracks ahead, a massive locomotive can't exactly pull a U-turn and escape, right? And third, these tracks stretched for miles through totally isolated areas with absolutely zero police presence. I mean, for an outlaw hiding out in the middle of nowhere, a heavily loaded train was just the ultimate, inescapable prize. Section 3. The James Younger Gang. We need to talk about Jesse and Frank James, along with the Younger brothers. Forget the romantic legends you might know today. These guys were incredibly violent former Confederate guerrillas who literally just turned their lethal wartime skills into a highly organized criminal enterprise. It's actually wild when you look at the historical contradiction here. On one hand, newspapers back then and the pop culture stories that followed painted these guys as rebellious, untouchable folk heroes who were just sticking it to the system. But the dark reality? Totally different story. These were incredibly dangerous criminals whose violent enterprise left terrified, very real victims in their wake. It wasn't a romantic adventure, it was brutal. Section 4. Strategy of the train heist. So let's shift focus to that harrowing 1873 Midwest robbery and look at how these outlaws actually managed to pull off these terrifying crimes. Their playbook was unbelievably simple, but brutally effective. Step 1. Force the train to stop or dangerously board it while it's still moving. Step 2. Immediately threaten the crew with lethal violence so you have absolute control. Step 3. Tear through the cars, completely ignore the everyday items, and go straight for the massive cash shipments. And Step 4. Disappear into the vast frontier. I mean, just imagine the absolute paralyzing terror those innocent passengers must have felt. One minute you're enjoying a peaceful journey, the next you're in an armed standoff. It really exposed just how incredibly fragile America's massive new railroad system truly was. Section 5. The law strikes back. But listen, the era of the untouchable outlaw, it was starting to crumble. The railroad companies had finally had enough, and they started teaming up with heavy-hitting law enforcement. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it perfectly captures a total technological arms race. For a long time, the outlaws held all the cards: vast frontiers, impossible to follow trails, and incredibly fast horses. But technology totally flipped the script. Suddenly you have telegraph lines flashing information about criminal movements miles ahead of any horse. You've got private investigators, most famously the Pinkerton detectives, relentlessly tracking these gangs across state lines. Virtually overnight, these outlaws went from dodging a local sheriff to being cornered by a highly organized, relentless national network. The frontier was shrinking rapidly. Section 6, Reality versus the Legend. So, while the actual outlaws were being outsmarted and defeated by new technology, something really fascinating was happening at the exact same time. A massive mythology was being born, fueled by these breathless, overly dramatic newspaper articles and cheap dime novels. The very real horror of these crimes was stripped away and completely repackaged as thrilling entertainment. That's how we got the iconic tropes that define the Wild West today: the steaming locomotive, the masked men, the drawn guns, the desperate galloping escape. A genuinely dark and terrifying chapter of history was essentially smoothed over and crystallized into the Hollywood entertainment we still consume today. So, the crucial point is, we have to ask ourselves how we remember this history. Were these men really the fearless, rebellious heroes those old American stories want us to believe? Or were they simply violent criminals who only became legendary because a rapidly changing America just happened to be watching?